Adesso possiamo chiudere gli occhi 30 secondi e sognare quel momento in cui l'agricoltura rigenerativa sarà quella convenzionale, perché ci sono dei grandi gap da colmare e adesso infatti parleremo di analisi di queste opportunità che abbiamo sentito e dei gap da colmare con la presento in italiano, anche se secondo me capisce un po' quello che stiamo dicendo, ma poi il panel sarà in inglese, Gwen Jones, che è fondatrice di Nzatu Food Group, creato per sostenere i piccoli produttori nell'affrontare le grandi criticità sistemiche di cui stiamo parlando, ha oltre 30 anni di esperienza, è una voce molto autorevole e ha la tempra, il carattere per essere veramente resiliente e capace di offrire continuo supporto. Welcome. In conversazione con lei Angelo Riccaboni, che è responsabile, insegna e presiede il Santa Chiara Lab e quindi ha un'esperienza ampia su sia fronte europeo che internazionale e inquadrerete in modo sicuramente illuminante la congiuntura nella quale ci troviamo e la via d'uscita. Il timer lo avete lì e buon panel. E questo panel è in inglese, quindi chi ha bisogno, se potete rimettere per favore la slide della app per la traduzione. Grazie. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for having me here this morning. My name is Angelo Riccaboni. I'm the chair of the Prima Foundation, an international institution dedicated to innovation in agri-food systems in the Mediterranean area. So we are very pleased to have here Gwen today because she will give her perspective from an American but also African perspective and commenting what has been presented so far. I would like to anticipate or to summarize some of what we saw before and also giving a European perspective because we have also a very important European perspective. So we were very pleased to listen to very interesting cases of Italian companies, very focused on sustainability, regenerative activities, and also Enrico Giovannini mentioned the fact that being sustainable means being more successful as a company. And this is the key issue because if we do not convince companies that being sustainable or regenerative is a way for success, it will be difficult to go in the right direction. So in Italy we have a very interesting situation where we have certainly a great attention to these issues. I would like to highlight that in Italy we have just a parameter, 18% of our fields are organic farming. Europe will aim at 25%, Europe as an average is 9%. So we are double than Europe in terms of organic farming, so we need to highlight that. But of course there are also issues to deal with, and in particular what I would like to highlight is that we need to go towards more and more the issue of sustainable competitiveness, so to bring together sustainability and competitiveness. And this is not very, very easy, of course. What is emerging in our countries that we have small, medium-sized enterprises for which it's more difficult to begin or to go in the journey. A major lever for change in the last few years have been banks. Here we have not mentioned yet banks. I think that what I'm seeing is that banks are crucial. We are going from a top-down approach when the Commission was asking for very rigorous and maybe too heavy constraints, too heavy requests to companies. And it was clearly a top-down approach about disclosure, about reporting. Now, I'm talking to companies every week. Companies are more interested in a bottom-up approach because what has been said so far is clear. More and more companies are aware that being sustainable means being more competitive. It is growing, but the key actor is the financial sector. This is the press release issued yesterday by the European Central Bank, where they say that transition risk and carbon emissions of Euro financial sector portfolios continue to decline. banks are pushed to decline their investment in companies which do not care in reducing emissions. So decarbonization is a key issue also for banks. Why I mention it? Because banks will give more and more role to those companies who care about decarbonization, who care more about transition risks or climate change risks, even social risks. So this is a key lever for change, because more and more companies are obliged to do that, or they need to go in this direction in order to have better conditions by banks. And agriculture can be at risk because of the size of the companies, because of the low culture in these terms of companies. So what we see is that more and more farmers, even associations, are starting to be closer to this issue to reduce carbon emissions or to measure their emissions because of this need. So this is a very interesting change. And in order to go in this direction, innovation is important. And just to conclude and give the mic to Gwen, it is important to share the fact that Europe is investing a lot in innovation, especially in the issue of soils. As Ili was saying before, the importance of soil is really very, very relevant, and the emission soil is a huge investment by Europe in this. And also Europe invested a lot in innovation with a major activity within the National Plan for Resilience and Recovery, PNRR, which is agri-tech, which is putting a lot of money to support the transition of Italian farmers towards sustainability. So Europe is a bloc where there is attention. We are changing from a top-down approach to a bottom-up approach. There are also tools to improve. So the situation is not that bad, in my opinion. So I'm asking Gwen, what about, I mean, from what you listened this morning, what you learned this morning, I mean, which is your comments on the perspective from the US, but also from Africa?
Thank you, Angelo, and thank you, everyone. Good morning. My name is Gwen Jones, and thank you to Regenerative Society for having us here. Such a pleasure, Mr. Ili. Thank you very much, and to my colleagues. So just to summarize on the presenters that came before us, it was very, very interesting because there was a common thread that went through all the presentations that shows us that regeneration is not just merely an aspiration, but it's a necessary evolution, and it is here to stay. And in a nutshell, our global food systems of tomorrow will be regenerative, inclusive, and transparent. So that was the common thread that came through all the companies that we heard from today. So whether you're talking about soil health, supply chain redesign, optimized food storage, or even circularity, which were the comments that I took from those presentations earlier, we see that this is a systemic shift across the food sector. We at Nzatu are very pleased to see this because this is the work we do in African food chains across the continent, and to see global companies like we saw today that embrace the values and align with the principles that Nzatu works with on the ground is extremely encouraging. So we thank you for that, leading us in that way to all the companies that presented today. So when we look at the global food systems of tomorrow, today and tomorrow, of course, it's important to look at the geopolitical shifts and shocks that we've experienced, especially notably with the Ukraine war of 2022. But we found that in some of the presentations we touched on geopolitical risks. But I want to go a little bit deeper to see how it actually affects the food systems globally. As you're aware, the food systems are done on a regional export basis from the Americas going to the East, to Africa and Asia. So the Americans are more export market driven, and Asia and Africa more import driven. Notably, Africa's food import bill is 78 billion. That is no longer sustainable. With 60% of uncultivated arable land, this is a massive opportunity for us to shift that needle. And people always ask, how can we do that when only 3% of climate finance goes to our food systems? Well, while we wait for policy, global policy, to catch up with us, like what happened in the energy sector, and I was really encouraged to see Chiara from Italy, climate, yes. I wonder if you remember that slide that she put up of from 2014 to 2024. In 10 years, we saw this trajectory of renewable adoption globally. I think it was sitting at 98% in her slide in the last, on the 2024 measure. And as I looked at that slide, I was thinking, that is what we are going to see in our global food systems in the next 10 years. Because right now, our leaders, FAO, the United Nations, and leading policymakers are working on similar structures for the food systems. So the same transformation you saw in energy is what we're going to see in our food systems. So that is something really to celebrate. But it all starts with policy. And I'll also touch a little bit an encouraging tone about America in terms of regeneration. The large multi-corporations like Cargill, Arthur Daniels, Midland, which are huge food and feed companies, have pledged millions and millions of hectares of turning their production into regenerative. Of note, ADM, their pledge is 5 million by 2030. Right now, they've reached a target of already 3 million hectares that they've changed into regenerative agriculture. We've got Cargill, Syngenta, and even in the supply chains, we've got Target, the grocery retail, who have targeted to do their supply chain to be sustainable, 100% sustainable by 2030. So there is encouragement in the bigger corporations. The pledge is there that they have given those commitments. And one might ask, well, how will they do that? How will a corporation like ADM fulfill that pledge? They are using the models that we have used in the smaller community-driven mechanisms by collaborating and bringing in large networks. ADM has a farmer business network of 100,000 farmers across the US that they've brought in to consolidate that and have that pledge where they measure the soil health with Earth Optics and the fertilizer companies. And through those pledges, they're able to brand their food products that underpin the pledges of what they've assigned. So that is really encouraging. And how do we make those consumer shifts? It's being done with different brand initiatives like food as medicine. So for the late adopters of climate change, we are going in with initiatives that are branding it from a health point of view instead of pushing the regenerative and climate change messages. So we've had to tweak the narrative to appeal to different consumer groups so we get that adoption. But I will summarize and give it back to Angelo, but I'll just summarize to say the global food systems of tomorrow are going to be driven by climate resilience, consumer shifts, like I spoke on earlier about food for medicine, technology and data, regionalization, which I touched on a bit, and of course, equity and inclusion. And I'm happy to go more in detail on any one of those 5 major trends to any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen. I think that the time is over, so we don't want to spend more time. Thanks a lot for your perspective and for the contribution you gave. And now, again, the mic to the Master of Ceremony. Thank you.
Thank you very much.